Clara's knees hit this frozen ground. She couldn't feel them anymore. "Mama!" Benjamin grabbed her arm. "Get up! You gotta get up!" The stagecoach had vanished into the white wall of snow 10 minutes ago. The driver hadn't looked back. Not once. 5 children huddled around her, hungry, freezing, terrified, and the only shelter for miles was a cabin belonging to a man who expected one bride. Not 6 desperate souls. 50 yards up the trail, a door creaked open. A figure stepped out, rifle in hand. Clara forced herself to stand. If you want to see how this widow and her 5 children survive the harshest winter and the coldest heart on this mountain, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. The letter had promised one woman. Silas Calhoun read it 3 times before he believed it. Clara Jane Whitmore, widow, 34, willing to work, no mention of children. He shoved the letter in his pocket and grabbed his rifle. The stagecoach was 3 hours late. In this weather, that meant trouble. "Damn fool woman," he muttered, pulling open the cabin door. "Traveling in December." Wind hit him like a punch. Snow drove sideways, thick as smoke. He couldn't see past the fence post. Then he heard it. A child screaming. Silas ran. He found them huddled near the old pine, a woman on her knees, surrounded by small figures. The wind tore at their thin coats. One of the children was wailing. Another stood frozen, mouth open, no sound coming out. "Mr. Calhoun!" The woman looked up. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were not. "That's me. I'm Clara Whitmore." She grabbed his arm and pulled herself up. "These are my children." Silas counted. 1, 2, 3. 4A toddler, wrapped in a scrap of blanket, clutched by a boy who couldn't be more than 12. 5. The letter didn't say nothing about... I know what it said. Clara stepped between him and the children. "The agency told me to lie. Said no man would take a widow with 5 mouths. I was supposed to come alone first, then send for them." "But you didn't. Would you have left your children behind?" He had no answer for that. The toddler started crying again, a thin, exhausted sound that cut through the wind. "How far did you walk?" Silas asked. "From the bottom of the ridge. The driver refused to bring us up." "That's 2 miles. I can count, Mr. Calhoun." He looked at the children again. The oldest boy glared at him with open hatred. A girl of maybe 10 had her arms around 2 smaller ones, a boy and a girl, both shaking so hard their teeth chattered. The toddler had gone quiet, which was worse. "Cabin's half a mile up," Silas said. "Can they make it?" "They'll make it. The little one won't." He reached for the toddler. "Give her to me." The boy jerked back. "Don't touch her." "Benjamin." Clara's voice cracked like a whip. "Give him Lily. Now." "Mama, we don't know. I know he's the only thing standing between us and dying in this snow. Give him your sister." The boy's jaw tightened. For a moment Silas thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he handed over the child. She weighed nothing. Bones wrapped in wet cloth. "Hold on to my coat," Silas told her. Tiny fingers gripped the leather. A small face pressed against his neck. "Stay behind me," he said to Clara. "Step where I step. There's holes in this trail that'll swallow you whole." She nodded and grabbed the oldest girl's hand. "Sarah, hold on to Jacob and Emma. Benjamin, stay with me. Nobody lets go. Understand?" 5 heads nodded. They walked. The cabin was dark when they reached it. Silas kicked the door open and carried Lily inside, setting her in the chair nearest the hearth. "Get them by the fire," he said. "I'll get wood." He was back in 30 seconds, arms full of kindling. Clara had already stripped the wet coats off the younger children. The boy Jacob stood shivering in nothing but a thin shirt. The girl Emma clutched a rag doll and wouldn't stop shaking. "She won't let go of it," the older girl Sarah said. "She hasn't let go since Papa died." Silas knelt by the hearth and struck a match. The kindling caught. He fed it larger pieces until flames roared up, throwing heat into the frozen room. "Closer," he said. "All of you, closer to the fire." Jacob moved first, dropping to his knees on the stone hearth. "It's warm, Mama. It's really warm." "I know, baby." "Are we going to stay here?" Clara looked at Silas. He looked away. "We'll see," she said. The stew was 3 days old, but it was hot. Silas ladled it into bowls, 6 of them, though he only owned 4. He'd eaten from a tin cup before. He could do it again. "Eat slow," Clara told her children. "Your stomachs ain't used to this much." They didn't listen. Benjamin shoveled food into his mouth like a starving dog. Sarah ate with more control, but her hands shook. Jacob licked his bowl clean, then looked up with hopeful eyes. "Is there more?" "No," Silas said. The boy's face fell. "But there will be tomorrow. I'll hunt in the morning." Jacob brightened. "You hunt with a real gun?" "That's generally how it's done." "Can I come?" "Jacob?" Clara's voice held warning. "I'm just asking Mama. Papa used to let me—" He stopped. His face crumpled. "Papa used to—" The cabin went silent. Clara pulled her son close. He buried his face in her shoulder, his thin body shaking with sobs he'd been holding back for God knew how long. "It's all right," she whispered. "It's all right?" But it wasn't. Silas could see that clear as day. Nothing about this was all right. Emma tugged on his sleeve. He looked down. "Mr.—" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah. Is this your house?" "It is. It's warm." "That's the idea." She considered this, hugging her rag doll tighter. "Our house was cold. After Papa went away, we couldn't make it warm no more." "Emma." Sarah pulled her sister back. "Don't bother the man." "She ain't bothering me." Sarah's eyes met his suspicious, measuring far too old for 10 years. "Mama says we shouldn't ask for things." She's right, but she wasn't asking, she was telling. He looked at Emma. "Your house is warm now. That's what matters." Emma smiled. It was small, uncertain, gone almost before it appeared. But it was real. Night came fast. Clara put the younger children to bed, all 4 of them crammed onto the single mattress, a pile of blankets pulled over their bodies. They fell asleep in minutes, exhausted beyond dreaming. Benjamin refused to sleep. "I'll keep watch," he said, positioning himself near the door. "Keep watch for what?" Silas asked. "Whatever comes." "Nothing's coming. Not in this storm." "You don't know that." "Boy, I've lived on this mountain 7 years. I know what comes and what doesn't." Benjamin's chin jutted out. "My name's not Boy, it's Benjamin. Benjamin Thomas Whitmore. And I don't take orders from strangers." Silas could have pushed back. Could have reminded this half-grown kid that he was in Silas's cabin, eating Silas's food, sleeping under Silas's roof. He didn't. "Fair enough, Benjamin Thomas Whitmore." He settled onto the floor near the fire, pulling his coat over himself like a blanket. "Keep watch if you want, but do it quiet. Your mama needs rest." Benjamin blinked, thrown off by the lack of argument. Clara touched her son's shoulder. "He's right. I need you sharp tomorrow, not falling asleep on your feet." "But Mama, please." Her voice dropped. "I can't lose you too." The fight drained out of Benjamin's face. He nodded once stiffly and moved to sit beside his siblings on the bed, not lying down, but not standing guard either. A compromise. Clara watched him for a moment, then crossed to the fire and sat on the bench across from Silas. "Thank you," she said, "for not pushing him. He's protecting his family. Can't fault a man for that. He's not a man. He's 12. He's been a man since your husband died, whether you wanted it or not." Clara flinched. "You don't know anything about us." "I know enough. I know you walked 2 miles through a blizzard with 5 children and no food. I know that boy's carrying a weight that'd break most grown men. I know you lied to a mail-order agency because you had no other choice." He met her eyes. "I know desperation when I see it, Mrs. Whitmore. I've worn it myself." She didn't respond. The fire crackled between them. "Your husband," Silas said. "How'd he die?" "Logging accident, last winter. Tree fell wrong." "And the farm?" "Bank took it. Said Thomas owed debts I didn't know about. Maybe he did. Maybe they lied. Doesn't matter now. You got no family. None that wanted us." Her voice hardened. "Thomas's people tried to take the children, split them up between different relatives, said I was unfit, said a widow with 5 mouths couldn't possibly—" She stopped, drew a breath. "I ran. Sold everything I had left, bought passage west, and prayed." "Prayed for what?" "A chance." She looked at him. "That's all I've ever wanted, Mr. Calhoun. Not charity, not pity, just a fair chance to keep my family together." Silas was quiet. The wind howled outside. Inside the fire threw shadows on the walls, 5 small shapes on the bed, 2 larger ones by the hearth. "I ain't decided yet," he said finally, "about you staying. I figured. But I ain't sending you out in this storm either. I figured that too. Tomorrow when it clears we'll talk." Clara nodded. "That's more than most would give." "Maybe I ain't most." She studied him. His weathered face, his rough hands, his eyes that had seen too much and said too little. "Maybe you ain't," she agreed. Sleep didn't come for Silas. He lay by the fire listening to the wind, the crackle of flames, the soft breathing of children who had finally stopped shivering. Sounds he hadn't heard in 7 years. Sounds he'd told himself he didn't miss. He was a liar. Clara stirred on the bed where she'd finally settled beside her children. Lily had crawled onto her chest. Emma had wrapped around her arm. Even in sleep they clung to her like she was the only solid thing in the world. Maybe she was. The fire burned low. Silas added another log, watching sparks spiral up the chimney. One bride, the letter had said. Healthy, God-fearing, willing to work. Nobody mentioned anything about gray eyes that held too much sorrow, or a spine made of iron and stubbornness, or 5 children who'd walked 2 miles through a blizzard because their mother told them to. He hadn't asked for this. He'd asked for a woman to cook his meals and mend his clothes and fill the silence that had been eating him alive since Maggie died. A transaction, simple and clean. Nothing about this was simple. The cabin creaked in the wind. Outside, wolves howled somewhere far off. From the bed came a small voice. "Mr." Silas turned. Emma sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her rag doll dangled from one hand. "You should be sleeping," he said. "Can't." She climbed off the bed, careful not to wake the others, and padded across the floor. "Bad dreams." "What kind?" "The kind where Papa goes away and doesn't come back." She stopped a few feet from him. "Do you have bad dreams?" "Sometimes." "What do you do?" "Sit by the fire. Wait for morning." Emma considered this. Then, without asking permission, she sat down beside him, her small body curled against the warmth of the hearth. "Can I wait with you?" Silas looked at her 5-year-old rag doll in her arms, eyes that had seen too much already. "Yeah," he said. "You can wait with me." She nodded, satisfied, and leaned her head against his arm. Within minutes, she was asleep. Dawn came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white. Silas eased away from Emma, who had somehow ended up curled in his lap during the night, and stepped outside to check the damage. The snow was knee-deep. Drifts piled against the cabin walls. The path to the outhouse had disappeared entirely. He grabbed a shovel and started digging. An hour later, footsteps crunched behind him. He turned to find Clara wrapped in a thin shawl, her breath fogging in the cold air. "You should stay inside," he said. "I don't take orders." Noticed that. She moved to stand beside him, surveying the white landscape. How long until the road clears? Day, maybe 2. And then, he drove the shovel into the snow. And then you'll have choices. What kind of choices? Town's got a boarding house. Church might take you in. There's work if you're willing to scrub floors and wash laundry. And if I'm not willing to leave? Silas stopped digging. Mrs. Whitmore. Clara. Clara. He turned to face her. I answered an ad for a wife. One wife. What I got was a widow with 5 children and more baggage than a freight train. I didn't sign up for this. Neither did I. Her voice was steady. You think I wanted to beg a stranger for shelter? You think I planned this? I had a life, Mr. Calhoun, a husband who loved me, a farm, a future. And then one morning a man knocked on my door and told me Thomas was dead, and everything fell apart. Her eyes glistened. She blinked hard. I didn't come here looking for a husband, she said. I came here looking for a chance. One chance to give my children a roof over their heads and food in their bellies. If you want us gone, say the word. I'll walk to that town myself and scrub every floor in the territory. But don't pretend I had choices, because I didn't. I had nothing. Nothing but 5 children and a letter from a stranger who lived on a mountain. Silas stood there, shovel in hand, the cold biting at his face. You done? He asked. For now. Good. He went back to digging. Because that boarding house charges more than you can afford, and the church only takes folks who attend regular. You start walking to town with 5 children in this snow, you'll be dead by nightfall. Clara's jaw tightened. So what are you saying? I'm saying you ain't got choices, not real ones. He threw a shovelful of snow aside. I'm also saying I ain't cruel enough to send a woman and her children to freeze. That's not an answer. It's the only one I got right now. The cabin door banged open. Benjamin stormed out, coatless, face red with anger. Mama Sarah said you were gonna marry this man. You can't. Papa's only been gone a year. Clara closed her eyes. Benjamin? I won't call him Pa. I won't. Nobody's asking you to. Then why are we here? Why can't we just... His voice cracked. Why can't things be like they were? Because they can't. Clara gripped her son's shoulders. Your father is dead. Our home is gone. The only people who offered to help wanted to tear this family apart. I won't let that happen, ever. Do you understand? Benjamin's face twisted. Tears streaked down his cheeks. I miss him, he whispered. I miss him so much. I know, baby. I know. She pulled him close. I miss him too. Silas turned away, giving them what privacy the open yard allowed. He kept shoveling, the rhythm steady his mind, anything but. He'd buried his wife 7 years ago. Buried his child the same day. Had come to this mountain to escape from people, from memories, from the wreckage of a life that had broken beyond repair. Now that wreckage had followed him. 6 strangers in his cabin. A widow who wouldn't break. Children who'd already lost everything. He didn't want this. But want and need were different things, and Silas Calhoun had learned long ago that the mountain didn't care about either. When he came back inside, the children were awake. Jacob sat by the fire, poking at the coals with a stick. Sarah was folding blankets with the precision of someone twice her age. Emma rocked her rag doll and hummed a tune that sounded like a lullaby. Lily toddled around the cabin, touching everything, her curiosity undimmed by yesterday's ordeal. Clara stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like burned oats. I used what I could find, she said without turning. Hope you don't mind. It's food. I don't mind. She nodded, still not looking at him. Silas hung his coat and moved to the table. Benjamin sat in the corner, arms crossed, glaring at nothing. Benjamin, Clara said, come eat. Not hungry. I don't care. Come eat. The boy didn't move. Benjamin Thomas Whitmore, I will not tell you again. Something in her tone broke through. Benjamin uncrossed his arms and slumped to the table, every movement screaming resentment. Clara served the oats in silence. The children ate without complaint, though the food was barely edible. Silas choked his portion down, washing it with black coffee. "Mr. Calhoun," Sarah's voice was quiet. "Yeah, thank you for letting us stay last night. You're welcome. And for carrying Lily. She doesn't usually let strangers hold her." She was cold, didn't have much choice. She had a choice. Sarah's eyes, brown like her mother's, met his. "She chose you." Silas didn't know what to say to that. Lily solved the problem by toddling over and raising her arms. "Up," she demanded. "Lily, don't bother," Clara started, but Silas was already lifting her. The little girl settled against his shoulder, thumb in her mouth, perfectly content. "She likes you," Jacob said, wonder in his voice. "She likes being warm." "Nuh-uh." Jacob shook his head. "She screamed when Mr. Henderson tried to hold her, and she bit the preacher." "Jacob." Clara's face flushed. "What she did?" Emma giggled. Even Sarah cracked a smile. Silas looked at the toddler in his arms. She gazed back with solemn gray eyes. "You bit a preacher?" he asked her. Lily nodded seriously. "Good girl." Clara made a choking sound. When Silas glanced at her, she was covering her mouth, shoulders shaking. It took him a moment to realize she was laughing. The day passed in strange domesticity. Silas fixed the draft in the window. Clara scrubbed the pots. The children explored the cabin, finding small treasures in forgotten corners: an old harmonica, a carved wooden horse, a jar of buttons that kept Jacob occupied for hours. Benjamin stayed apart, watching everything with suspicious eyes. "He'll come around," Clara said quietly when they crossed paths near the woodpile. "Will he?" "He doesn't trust easy. Neither did his father." She paused. "But Thomas came around eventually." "I ain't trying to replace him." "I know. Benjamin doesn't." She sighed. "He was there when they brought Thomas home. Saw the body before I could stop him. Something broke in him that day. I don't know how to fix it." "Some things don't get fixed. They just get carried." Clara looked at him. "Speaking from experience?" Silas didn't answer. He grabbed an armload of wood and headed back inside. That night, after the children slept, Clara found him on the porch. The sky had cleared. Stars blazed overhead, sharp and cold. "You never answered my question," she said. "Which one? Whether you're going to let us stay." Silas stared at the stars. "The preacher who put my name in with that agency he's been trying to marry me off for years. Says a man shouldn't be alone. Do you agree?" "I thought I didn't." He turned to face her. "My wife died 7 years ago. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either." Clara's breath caught. "I came up here to get away from everything that reminded me of her. Built this cabin with my own hands. Told myself I didn't need anyone." He paused. "Told myself that for 7 years. And now? Now I've got 5 children sleeping in my bed, and a widow asking me for something I don't know how to give. I'm not asking for love, Mr. Calhoun. What are you asking for?" She stepped closer. In the starlight, her face was pale, fierce, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with youth. "A home," she said. "That's all. A home for my children. Somewhere they can be safe. Somewhere they can stop running." She took a breath. "I'll work harder than any woman you've ever known. I'll cook your meals, mend your clothes, keep your house. I won't ask for affection. I won't ask for anything you can't give. Just let us stay." The wind whispered through the pines. "Spring's 4 months away," Silas said. "I know. Lot can happen in 4 months. I know that too." He looked at her. This woman made of iron and sorrow, asking for crumbs from a man who had nothing left but crumbs to give. "All right," he said. Clara blinked. "All right? You can stay. Till spring. After that, he shrugged. We'll see. We'll see, she repeated. That's the best I can offer. She nodded slowly. Then, before he could react, she reached out and touched his hand. Thank you, she whispered. Her fingers were cold, his were colder, but for one moment standing there under the frozen stars, neither of them felt alone. Later, after Clara had gone inside, Silas remained on the porch. He watched his breath fog in the air, listened to the silence of the mountain, thought about everything he'd lost, and everything that had somehow found its way to his door. Inside, Lily cried out in her sleep. He heard Clara's voice, soft and soothing. The crying stopped. 5 children, 1 widow, a cabin built for solitude. He hadn't asked for this, but maybe, just maybe, this was what he'd needed all along. The stars wheeled overhead. The mountain held its peace, and Silas Calhoun, for the first time in 7 years, let himself wonder what spring might bring. The first week passed in careful silence. Clara learned the rhythms of the cabin, when Silas rose when he ate, when he disappeared into the cold to check his traps. She learned which floorboards creaked and which drawers stuck. She learned that he took his coffee black and his meals without conversation. She learned not to ask questions he wouldn't answer. The children adjusted faster than she expected. Jacob followed Silas everywhere, peppering him with questions about hunting and trapping and survival. Sarah took over the mending, without being asked, her small fingers quick and precise. Emma sang to her rag doll and pretended the cabin was a castle. Lily toddled after anyone who would pay attention, her gray eyes bright with curiosity. Only Benjamin remained apart. He spoke when spoken to. He did his chores without complaint. But he watched Silas the way a dog watches a stranger, wary, ready to bite if threatened. Clara tried to talk to him about it on the 8th morning, while the others were still asleep. "You need to stop," she said quietly. Benjamin looked up from the boot he was lacing. Stop what? Glaring at him like he's the enemy. Maybe he is. He saved our lives. He let us stay. That ain't the same thing. Clara sat beside him on the bench. The fire had burned low, casting the cabin in gray shadows. Outside, the sun was just starting to rise. "Your father would want you to give him a chance," she said. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Don't talk about Papa." "Benjamin, you don't get to use him like that." His voice cracked. "You don't get to tell me what he'd want when he ain't here to say it himself." The words hit like a slap. Clara drew back, stung. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Benjamin stood, grabbing his coat. "I'm gonna get wood." He was out the door before she could respond. Clara sat alone in the dim light, listening to her son's footsteps crunch through the snow. She wanted to follow him, wanted to hold him, and promise that everything would be all right. But she couldn't promise that. Not anymore. The cabin door opened again. She looked up, expecting Benjamin. It was Silas. He stamped snow off his boots and hung his coat on the peg. His eyes found her immediately. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded, moving to the stove to start the coffee. "Saw your boy heading toward the woodpile. He looked angry. He's always angry. At me. At everything." Clara rubbed her face. "At God, at the world, at me for bringing him here. At his father for dying." Silas poured water into the pot. "That's a lot of anger for one boy. He's been carrying it for a year. I don't know how to help him put it down." "Maybe you can't." Silas turned to face her. "Maybe he's got to put it down himself. He's 12, old enough to understand death, old enough to hate it." He paused. "Old enough to decide whether he's going to let it break him or make him stronger." Clara looked at this man, this stranger, who had taken them in, who spoke more in one morning than he had all week. "You sound like you know something about that," she said. "I know what it's like to be angry at things you can't change." He turned back to the stove. "Coffee'll be ready soon." It wasn't an answer, but it was more than he usually gave. Clara watched him work, wondering what other griefs he carried beneath that weathered silence. The door banged open. Benjamin stomped in, arms full of wood, face red from cold. "Got enough for 2 days?" he said, dumping the logs by the hearth. "Thank you," Clara said. Benjamin grunted and moved toward the back of the cabin, putting as much distance between himself and Silas as possible. Silas watched him go, expression unreadable. "Give him time," Clara said quietly. "Ain't going nowhere." It was the closest thing to patience she'd heard from him. She held on to it like a promise. 2 days later, the first real test came. Silas had gone to check his trap line, leaving Clara alone with the children. The morning passed quietly, lessons for the older ones, games for the younger. By noon, the cabin felt almost normal. Then Emma started coughing. It began as a tickle, a small sound Clara barely noticed. By mid-afternoon, the coughs came in waves, deep and rattling, each one shaking Emma's small body. "Mama," Sarah's voice was tight with fear. "She's burning up." Clara pressed her hand to Emma's forehead. Hot. Too hot. "Get me cold water," she said. "And cloth. Clean cloth." Sarah ran to obey. Benjamin appeared at Clara's elbow. "What's wrong with her?" "Fever." Clara stripped off Emma's dress and wrapped her in a damp sheet. "Could be a cold. Could be something worse." "Worse like what?" Clara didn't answer. She'd seen children die from fevers. Seen them healthy one day and gone the next. The memory of it, the small coffins, the empty beds, rose up like bile in her throat. "Mama." Emma's voice was thin, frightened. "I don't feel good." "I know, baby, I know." Clara smoothed the hair from her daughter's face. "You're gonna be fine. Mama's gonna make you better." "Promise?" Clara's throat closed. She couldn't promise. Not this. Not something so far beyond her control. "I promise to try," she said. "That's all anyone can do." Emma nodded, her eyes already glazing with fever. The afternoon crawled by. Clara bathed Emma's forehead with cool water, forced sips of broth between her cracked lips, prayed every prayer she'd ever learned. The other children hovered nearby. Jacob pale and silent. Lily confused, Sarah helping wherever she could. Benjamin paced like a caged animal. "Where is he?" he demanded. "The man should be back by now." "He'll come when he comes." "She needs a doctor." "The nearest doctor is in town. Even if we could get there, the snow. So we just sit here? We just wait while she—" Benjamin's voice broke. "I can't lose another one, Mama. I can't." Clara caught his arm. "Look at me." He resisted, then met her eyes. His face was wet with tears he hadn't let fall. "Your sister is strong," Clara said. "She survived a blizzard. She survived walking 2 miles in the snow. She's not going to let a fever beat her. You don't know that." "No, I don't." She gripped him tighter. "But I believe it, and right now belief is all we have." The cabin door opened. Silas stepped inside, a brace of rabbits over his shoulder. He took one look at Clara's face and dropped the game on the floor. "What happened?" "Emma. Fever. It came on fast." He crossed to the bed where Emma lay, her small body shivering despite the heat radiating off her skin. His hand pressed to her forehead. "How long?" 4 or 5 hours. "She been coughing?" "Yes." Silas straightened. "I've got something that might help. Old remedy Maggie used to make. Stay with her." He moved to the shelf in the corner, pulling down jars Clara hadn't noticed, dried herbs, roots, things she couldn't identify. His hands worked quickly, grinding, mixing, steeping. "You know medicine?" Clara asked. "I know enough to keep myself alive." He brought a cup of murky liquid to the bedside. "This'll taste like hell, but it'll bring the fever down. Hold her head up." Clara lifted Emma's shoulders, while Silas tipped the cup to her lips. "Drink," he said. "Slow." Emma sputtered, coughed, tried to turn away. "I know it's bad." Silas said, his voice softer than Clara had ever heard it. "But you gotta drink it anyway. Can you do that for me?" Emma looked at him with glassy eyes. Then slowly she nodded. She drank the whole cup. "Good girl." Silas set the cup aside. "Now sleep. The medicine needs time to work." Emma's eyes fluttered closed. Within minutes her breathing evened out. Clara stared at Silas. "How did you know what to do?" "Maggie was a healer's daughter, taught me everything she knew." He stood wiping his hands on his pants. "Fever should break by morning. If it doesn't, then we pray harder." It wasn't comfort, but it was honesty, and Clara had learned to value that. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and moved away to deal with the rabbits. From the corner of the room, Benjamin watched in silence. The fever broke just before dawn. Clara woke to find Emma's forehead cool, her breathing steady, her color returning to normal. She sobbed with relief, pressing her face into the mattress to muffle the sound. "Mama." Emma's voice was weak but clear. "Why are you crying?" "Because I'm happy, baby. Because I'm so happy." She gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her like she might disappear. The other children crowded around, touching Emma's hands and face, as if to confirm she was real. Jacob burst into tears. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Lily climbed onto the bed and planted a wet kiss on Emma's cheek. Only Benjamin hung back. Clara looked up to find him standing near the fireplace, arms crossed, his expression complicated. "Benjamin, come say good morning to your sister." He hesitated. Then slowly, he crossed the room. "Hey, Em." His voice was rough. "You scared us." "I didn't mean to." "I know." He reached out awkward and patted her head. "Just don't do it again, okay?" Emma smiled. "Okay." Benjamin turned away, but not before Clara caught the shine in his eyes. Progress. Small but real. Silas came in from outside, stamping snow from his boots. He took in the scene. The children clustered around the bed. Clara's tear-streaked face, Emma sitting up and looking almost normal. "Fever broke," Clara said. "Figured." He hung his coat. "She'll be weak for a few days. Keep her warm, keep her fed, don't let her run around." "I will, thank you." He shrugged like it was nothing. Like saving a child's life was just another chore. Benjamin cleared his throat. Everyone turned to look at him. "Mr. Calhoun." The words seemed to cost him something. "That medicine you made. Could you teach me how—" Silas studied the boy for a long moment. "Why?" "Because." Benjamin swallowed. "Because I couldn't do anything. I just stood there while my sister was sick and I couldn't do anything. I don't want to feel like that again." The cabin was silent. Clara held her breath. "All right," Silas said finally. "I'll teach you." Benjamin blinked, surprised. "Really? Man should know how to take care of his family. That's what you're trying to do, ain't it?" The boy's throat worked. "Yes, sir." "Then we start tomorrow. Now go eat breakfast. You look like you ain't slept in days." Benjamin nodded and moved toward the table, but he paused as he passed Silas. "Thank you," he said quietly. It was the first civil word he'd spoken to the man since they'd arrived. Silas just nodded, but Clara saw his hand tremble as he poured his coffee. The days began to blur together after that. A rhythm emerged, meals and chores, and small moments that stitched themselves into something like a life. Silas taught Benjamin about the herbs that grew on the mountain, which ones healed and which ones killed. Clara mended clothes and cooked meals and slowly, carefully learned the shape of this man who had given them shelter. He wasn't what she'd expected. She'd expected gruff silence. She'd expected resentment, impatience, the barely concealed frustration of a man saddled with burdens he didn't want. Instead, she found quiet kindness hidden beneath the rough exterior. Small gestures. A cup of coffee waiting for her each morning. Wood chopped without being asked. A carved wooden horse left on Jacob's pillow one night, no explanation given. He noticed things too. When Sarah's shoes wore through, he produced a pair of boots from somewhere too big but serviceable. When Jacob complained about having nothing to do, Silas put a fishing rod in his hands and taught him to cut through the ice. When Emma had nightmares crying out in the dark, it was Silas who reached her first, his low voice soothing her back to sleep. He never asked for thanks, never drew attention to what he did. Clara watched and wondered and found herself thinking about him in ways she hadn't expected. It scared her. One evening after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch again. The sky was clear stars burning bright against the black. "You're gonna freeze out here," she said, settling beside him. "Been colder." "That's not a reason." He shrugged. They sat in silence, watching their breath fog the air. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. "You can ask. Don't mean I'll answer." "Fair enough." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Why did you agree to this, the mail-order bride thing? You don't seem like a man who wants company." "The preacher thought I needed saving." "From what?" "Myself, I reckon." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been alone a long time, Clara. After Maggie died, I figured alone was all I'd ever be. Thought I wanted it that way. And now—" He turned to look at her. In the starlight, his face was all shadows and angles. "Now I ain't so sure." Something shifted between them. Clara felt it, a warmth that had nothing to do with the cold, a pull that made her want to lean closer. She stood up abruptly. "I should check on the children. They're fine." "I know. I just—" She couldn't meet his eyes. "Good night, Mr. Calhoun." "Silas?" She paused at the door. "My name," he said. "It's Silas. You've been here 3 weeks. Might as well use it." "Silas." The name felt strange on her tongue. Strange, but not unpleasant. "Good night, Silas." She went inside before he could respond. That night, lying in bed with her children pressed around her, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the man on the other side of the wall. She failed. The second week of February brought trouble. It started with a knock on the door, sharp, insistent, unexpected. Silas was out checking traps. Clara was alone with the children. "Stay here," she told them, reaching for the rifle Silas kept by the door. She'd never fired one, but she knew which end was dangerous. She opened the door. 2 men stood on the porch. One was tall and thin, with a face like a hatchet. The other was shorter, wider, his smile too friendly to be real. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The tall one spoke. Clara's blood went cold. "Who's asking?" "Name's Harlan Price. This here's my associate, Mr. Decker. We represent the First Bank of Kansas City." She tightened her grip on the rifle. "I don't know anyone by that name." Now. Price's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not play games, ma'am. We know who you are. We know you ran from some outstanding debts. We've been looking for you for quite some time." "I don't owe your bank anything." "The paperwork says different." He pulled a folded document from his coat. "Your husband took out a loan before he died. Quite a substantial one. When you fled Missouri, that debt didn't disappear. It followed you." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Price stepped closer. Clara raised the rifle. He stopped, hands up, still smiling that terrible smile. "Careful now. We're just here to talk." "Then talk from there." "Fair enough." He tucked the paper back in his coat. "Here's the situation, Mrs. Whitmore. You owe our bank $300. Now I understand you don't have that kind of money. Most folks don't. But there are other ways to settle a debt." "What kind of ways?" "Your children, for instance." His eyes flicked past her into the cabin. "Healthy stock. The boys could work. The girls could be placed with families who'd take good care of them. Everyone ends up happy." Clara's finger found the trigger. "Get off this property." "This ain't your property, ma'am. It belongs to some hermit named Calhoun. We checked the records. It's his property and you're not welcome on it." "We'll be back." Price tipped his hat. Think about our offer. $300 or the children. One way or another, that debt gets paid. They turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Clara stood frozen, the rifle shaking in her hands. "Mama!" She spun. Benjamin stood behind her, his face white. "Who were those men?" "No one. Go back inside." "I heard what they said. About the debt. About taking us." "Benjamin? Is it true? Did Papa owe them money?" Clara set the rifle down. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. "I don't know," she admitted. "There was a loan, but I thought it was paid off before he died. I don't know where this is coming from. Maybe they're lying. Maybe." She pulled him close. "But either way, they're not taking any of you. I won't let that happen. What are we gonna do? We're gonna wait for Silas, and then we're gonna figure this out. Together." Clara looked at her son, this boy who'd distrusted Silas from the first moment, who'd fought against accepting help from anyone. "Together," she said. "All of us." Benjamin nodded slowly. They went inside to wait. Silas came back an hour before sunset. Clara met him at the door. The moment he saw her face, his expression hardened. What happened? She told him everything: the men, the debt, the threat against her children. By the time she finished, his jaw was set like stone. "Describe them." One, tall and thin, called himself Harlan Price. The other was shorter, Decker. "They from the bank. They said so, but something felt wrong, like they were playing a part." Silas nodded slowly. "Could be collectors. Banks hire them to track down people who run, pay them a percentage of whatever they recover." "But I don't owe anything. Thomas paid that loan." "You got proof." Clara's heart sank. "It was in the farmhouse. All our papers. When the bank seized everything." "Then they've got your word against theirs. And out here, words don't mean much without paper to back them up." "So what do we do?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. The children had gathered near the fire, listening. Even Lily seemed to sense the tension, her thumb in her mouth, her gray eyes wide. "They'll come back," Silas said finally. "Men like that always do. When they do, I'll handle it." "How?" He met her eyes. "You don't want to know how." "Silas." "Clara." His voice was firm. "I ain't gonna let them take your children. You understand, I don't care what papers they wave around, or what threats they make. That ain't happening. Not while I'm breathing." The words hung in the air between them. "Why?" Clara whispered. "Why do you care so much?" He looked at her, looked at the children behind her, the family that had stumbled into his life, uninvited and unwanted. "Because maybe this is why I've been waiting," he said. "Maybe this is what I was supposed to find." He walked past her into the cabin, leaving her standing in the doorway with the cold wind at her back and something warm blooming in her chest. That night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Silas sat by the fire cleaning his rifle. Clara watched him from the bed, the other children curled around her. She should have been asleep, should have been resting before whatever storm was coming. Instead, she watched this man who had promised to protect her family. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "Sorry." "Don't be." He set the rifle aside. "Can't sleep either." "Too much on my mind." He nodded, staring into the flames. "Your husband, the one who died, what kind of man was he?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you want to know?" "Trying to figure out what kind of debt he might have left behind. What kind of people might come after it." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she rose carefully, easing out from under the blankets, and crossed to sit beside him. "Thomas was a good man," she said. "Hard-working, honest, maybe too honest for his own good. He trusted people who shouldn't have been trusted, signed papers he probably shouldn't have signed." "He ever mention anyone named Price?" "No, but there was a man, a business partner of some kind. Thomas met with him a few times before he died. Never told me what they discussed. You remember his name? Clara searched her memory. Warren. Something Warren. I only met him once. He came to the funeral. Silas's expression flickered. What did he look like? Tall, thin, cold eyes. Her stomach dropped. Oh God. Silas, do you think? I think somebody's been planning this a long time. He stood pacing to the window. Your husband dies. The bank takes everything. A widow with 5 children has no options, so she runs west. And the men who set it all up follow her waiting for the right moment to collect. Collect what? We have nothing. You have children. Healthy children. You know what they're worth to the right buyer. Clara felt sick. That's not possible. That can't be. It's the frontier, Clara. Anything's possible out here. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to scream. Hey. Silas crossed back to her kneeling, so their eyes were level. Look at me. She looked. I ain't gonna let that happen. You hear me? Whatever they're planning, it ain't gonna work. I've faced worse than a couple of debt collectors. You don't even know us. We showed up on your doorstep a month ago. Why would you risk your life for strangers? His hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. You ain't strangers anymore, he said quietly. Clara's breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Lily cried out from the bed, caught in some childish nightmare, and the moment shattered. Clara went to comfort her daughter. Silas went back to cleaning his rifle. But something had changed between them. Something that couldn't be unchanged. The next morning, Silas disappeared before dawn. Clara found a note on the table. Gone to town. Back before dark. Keep the rifle loaded. She spent the day in a state of barely controlled panic, jumping at every sound, watching the tree line for signs of movement. Benjamin stayed close, his hand never far from the hunting knife Silas had given him. Sarah kept the younger children occupied with games and stories, her voice calm even though her eyes were scared. The hours crawled by. Afternoon came, then evening. The sun began to sink below the mountains. No sign of Silas. He said before dark, Benjamin muttered. It's almost dark. I know. What if something happened? Nothing happened. He knows these mountains better than anyone. But those men? Benjamin. Enough. Her son fell silent. The shadows grew longer. The cabin grew cold. Clara added wood to the fire and tried not to imagine all the things that could have gone wrong. Then finally, footsteps on the porch. The door opened. Silas stepped inside, tired, dirty, but whole. Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. You're back. Said I would be. He hung his coat and crossed to the fire. Got news. Some good, some bad. Tell me. He sat heavily on the bench. Talked to some people in town. Asked around about your husband's debt. Turns out those men ain't from any bank. The First Bank of Kansas City went under 2 years ago. They're con men, Clara, running a scam on desperate folks who can't check the records. So the debt isn't real. The debt's real enough, but they bought it for pennies on the dollar, and now they're trying to collect the full amount. Probably done this a dozen times before. Clara's relief curdled into anger. Those bastards. Gets worse. I found out they've been asking around town about you. About me. About whether anyone would miss us if we disappeared. Disappeared? Way out here people vanish all the time. Bad weather. Wild animals, accidents. His eyes were hard. Nobody asks too many questions. So what do we do? Silas pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. Got this from the county clerk. A copy of your husband's original loan agreement. Paid in full 6 months before he died. Signed and witnessed. Clara took the paper with trembling hands. How did you? Called in some favors. Point is, you don't owe anyone anything. Those men come back, you show them this. And if they don't leave... He touched the rifle by the door. Then I'll make them leave. Clara stared at the paper in her hands. Proof. Real tangible proof that her husband hadn't been a fool, hadn't left her drowning in debt, hadn't failed his family. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Silas, I don't know how to—" "You don't have to thank me." He stood his hand brushing her shoulder as he passed. "You're family now. Family takes care of each other." He walked to the window and stared out at the darkening sky. Clara watched him through blurred eyes, clutching the paper to her chest like a lifeline. Family. The word echoed in the silence. And for the first time since Thomas died, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a promise. 3 days passed without sign of Price or Decker. Clara kept the rifle close anyway. She checked the windows more than she should, watched the tree line until her eyes burned. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind made her heart jump. "You're gonna wear yourself out," Silas said on the third evening. "I can't help it. They ain't coming tonight." "How do you know?" He was mending a harness by the fire, his hands steady, his voice calm. "Because I've been watching the ridge all day. Nobody's been up or down since Tuesday." Clara sank onto the bench across from him. "I hate waiting." "Waiting's half of living out here. The other half. Surviving what comes after." She almost smiled. Almost. From the corner, Jacob looked up from the fishing lure he was making. "Mr. Silas." "Yeah. If the bad men come back, are you gonna shoot them?" Clara tensed. "Jacob, it's a fair question." Silas set down the harness. "You want an honest answer?" Jacob nodded, his 7-year-old face serious. "I'm gonna do whatever it takes to keep your family safe. If that means shooting, then I'll shoot. But killing ain't something a man should want to do. You understand?" "I think so." "Good." Silas picked up the harness again. "Now show me that lure. You're wrapping the thread too loose." Jacob scrambled over the dark question already forgotten. Clara watched them together, the grizzled mountain man and the small boy heads, bent over a fishing lure. Something in her chest ached at the sight. "He likes you," she said quietly. "He likes fishing. I'm just the man who teaches him." "It's more than that, and you know it." Silas didn't respond, but his hands stilled for just a moment. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Clara found him on the porch again. He seemed to live there now, keeping watch, guarding against threats, both real and imagined. She settled beside him, without asking permission. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I sleep plenty." "You sleep 3 hours a night. I've been counting." He turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You've been watching me." "Hard not to. You're always there." "Bothers you?" "No." She pulled her shawl tighter. "That's what bothers me." Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Clara, I ain't good at this." "Good at what?" "Talking, feeling, whatever it is that's happening between us." "Is something happening?" He met her eyes. In the moonlight, his face was all planes and shadows, but his gaze was clear. "You know there is." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Silas!" "You don't have to say anything. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving. I ain't asking for nothing. I just—" He exhaled a cloud of white in the cold air. "I wanted you to know." She should have pulled back, should have reminded him that she'd come here for shelter, not love, that her heart was still buried in a grave in Missouri. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold, rough. They closed around hers like a man grasping a lifeline. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of wanting this, of losing it." She swallowed. "Of waking up one day and finding out it was all a dream." "It ain't a dream." "How do you know?" "Because dreams don't feel like this." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Dreams don't hurt this much." She laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. "That's a terrible thing to say." "I'm a terrible man." "No." She squeezed his hand. "You're not." They sat there in the cold hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Some things existed beyond words. The peace lasted 4 more days. On the 5th morning, Benjamin came running in from the woodpile. "Riders!" he gasped. "2 of them, coming up the ridge." Clara grabbed the rifle. Silas grabbed his pistol. "Stay inside," he told her. "I'm coming with you." "Clara!" "They threatened my children. I'm coming." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Benjamin, watch your siblings. Don't let anyone in unless it's me or your mother." "Yes, sir." Clara caught the word. "Sir. Not Mr. Calhoun. Not his name. Sir." Something had shifted in her son. She didn't have time to wonder what. She followed Silas out onto the porch. The riders came slowly up the trail. Price and Decker, just as she remembered. Price's smile was wider this time, more confident. Decker had a shotgun across his saddle. "Mr. Calhoun." Price tipped his hat. "We meet at last. State your business and get off my land. Our business is with Mrs. Whitmore. She owes a debt." Clara stepped forward, the paper from Silas clutched in her hand. "I don't owe you anything." She held up the document. "This is a copy of my husband's loan agreement, paid in full, signed and witnessed." Price's smile faltered. "Where did you get that?" "County records. The First Bank of Kansas City went bankrupt 2 years ago. Whatever debt you claim to hold ain't worth the paper it's printed on." Decker shifted on his horse, his hand moving toward the shotgun. "Easy," Silas said. His pistol was already drawn, aimed at Decker's chest. "You reach for that weapon, you'll be dead before you touch it." Decker froze. Price raised his hands, the smile returning, though thinner now. "Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement." "Only arrangement is you leaving, now." "I don't think you understand the situation, Mr. Calhoun. There are more of us. Men who won't take kindly to being cheated out of what they're owed." "You ain't owed nothing." "The children alone would fetch a good price. 5 healthy young ones. That's worth more than any paper debt." Clara's blood turned to ice. Silas didn't flinch. "You just threatened to sell children on my property." "I'm merely pointing out the economic realities of—" The gunshot split the air. Decker screamed, clutching his hand. The shotgun fell to the snow, blood spattering across its barrel. Price's horse reared. He fought to control it, his face white with shock. "That was your partner's trigger finger," Silas said, his voice flat. "Next shot takes his head. You want to keep talking about economic realities. You're insane." "Probably, but I'm also the man holding the gun." Silas stepped forward. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna ride back down this mountain. You're gonna tell whoever sent you that Clara Whitmore don't owe nobody nothing. And if I ever see either of you again, if I hear so much as a whisper of your names in this territory, I'll track you down and finish what I started today. You can't just—" "I can. I am. Now get." Decker was moaning, trying to stop the bleeding. Price looked from his partner to Silas to Clara, calculating odds, weighing options. "This isn't over," he said finally. "It is for you." Price turned his horse. He had to help Decker into the saddle. The man was pale, shaking, barely conscious. Together they started down the trail, leaving a red trail in the snow. Clara didn't lower the rifle until they disappeared from sight. "Silas." Her voice was trembling. "You shot him." "I did." "What if they come back with more men?" "They won't." "How can you be sure?" He turned to face her. His eyes were hard, but his voice was gentle. "Because men like that are cowards. They prey on folks who can't fight back. Soon as they see resistance, they run. They ain't got the stomach for a real fight. But if you're wrong, then we'll face it together." He holstered his pistol. "Go inside. Check on the children. I'm gonna follow their trail, make sure they really leave. Be careful. Always am. He started toward the stable. Clara watched him go, her heart still pounding, her hands still shaking. Then she turned and walked inside. The children were huddled together near the fire. Benjamin had positioned himself in front of the others, the hunting knife in his hand. Sarah held Lily. Jacob and Emma clutched each other. "It's all right," Clara said. "They're gone." "We heard a gunshot," Benjamin said. "Silas shot one of them, just his hand, to make a point." "Did he kill him?" "No." Benjamin's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. Good. I didn't want him to have to kill nobody on account of us." The boy sheathed his knife. "Bad enough we brought this mess to his door." Clara crossed to her son and pulled him close. "This isn't your fault," she said. "None of this is your fault." "I know." But his voice was thick and she felt wetness against her shoulder. I thought we were done running, Mama. I thought we were safe." "We are safe." "Are we?" She didn't have an answer for that. Silas returned an hour later. "They're gone," he said, hanging up his coat. "Followed them halfway down the mountain. They ain't coming back." Clara nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. "What happens now?" "Now we eat supper." He moved to the stove, starting to warm the leftover stew. "Life goes on. Just like that. What do you want me to say?" He turned to look at her. "Want me to tell you everything's gonna be perfect, that there's no more bad men out there? I can't promise that. Nobody can." "I know. What I can promise is this." He crossed to where she stood. "Long as I'm breathing, nobody's taking those children. Nobody's hurting this family. That enough for you?" Clara looked up at him. This man who had shot another man to protect them, who had given them shelter and warmth, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. "It's enough," she said. He nodded, turning back to the stove. "Supper in 10 minutes. Get the young ones washed up." Clara gathered her children. They moved through the familiar routine. Washing hands, setting the table, fighting over who sat where. Normal things, simple things. But nothing felt normal anymore. Everything felt like it could shatter at any moment. That night, after everyone else had fallen asleep, Clara found herself unable to rest. She lay in the dark, listening to her children's breathing, replaying the day's events over and over. The gunshot, the blood in the snow, the cold certainty in Silas's voice when he'd threatened to kill. This man who carved wooden toys and made medicine from herbs. This man who carried Lily on his shoulders and taught Jacob to fish. This man who had just shot a stranger without hesitation. Who was he really? She rose quietly and crossed to the fire. Silas was there, as she knew he would be. He didn't look up when she sat beside him. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No. Too much thinking." Something like that. She paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Have you killed before?" The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment he didn't answer. "Yes," he said finally. "How many?" "More than I want to remember. Less than some." He stared into the flames. "I was in the war, Tennessee Regiment. Saw things that still wake me up at night." "Is that why you came out here, to get away from it?" "Partly. Mostly I came because Maggie wanted to. She had a dream about building something new somewhere clean, somewhere the past couldn't follow." His jaw tightened. "She didn't get to see it finished." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She's at peace now. That's more than most of us get." Clara was quiet, processing this new information. The war, the killing, the grief. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked. "The loss?" "No. You just learn to carry it different. Like a wound that heals but never stops aching." He turned to look at her. "You're still carrying yours. Every day. Does it bother you? What I did today?" She thought about it, really thought about it. "No. she admitted. That's what scares me. Why? Because a year ago, I would have been horrified. A year ago, I believed in law and order and letting authorities handle things. But now, she shook her head, now I understand why a man does what he has to do. And that understanding feels like losing part of myself. It ain't losing yourself. It's growing up. Silas reached out and took her hand. World ain't fair, Clara. Never has been. Only thing that protects the innocent is folks willing to do the hard things, the ugly things. You think I liked shooting that man? No. You're right. I didn't. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant keeping your children safe. His grip tightened. That ain't violence for violence's sake. That's love, the fierce kind, the kind that don't back down. Love. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Silas went very still. I didn't mean, she started. I know what I said. His voice was low. And I meant it. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the walls. Silas. You don't have to say nothing back. I told you before I ain't asking for anything. Just let me have this. Let me love your family, even if you can't love me. Clara's heart cracked open. This man, this broken, wounded, beautiful man, offering everything and expecting nothing. What if I can? She whispered. He looked at her sharply. Clara. What if I want to? She moved closer, close enough to see the firelight dancing in his eyes. What if I've been falling since the day you carried Lily through that blizzard, and I've been too scared to admit it? You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She lifted her hand to his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. I'm saying I'm tired of being scared. I'm saying my husband's been dead for a year, and I've been dead with him, and you make me feel alive again. I'm saying... He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was desperate and hungry, and full of all the things neither of them had words for. She melted into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, his arms pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That was... Clara couldn't finish. Yeah. Silas rested his forehead against hers. It was. What do we do now? I don't know. His laugh was shaky. I ain't exactly planned for this. Neither did I. Regret it. She kissed him again, softer this time. Does that answer your question? It's a start. They stayed there by the fire, wrapped around each other, until the first hints of dawn crept through the windows. It wasn't a solution to anything. The world was still dangerous. The future was still uncertain. Price and Decker might return with reinforcements. The winter wasn't over. 100 things could still go wrong. But for this one moment, none of that mattered. For this one moment, they had each other. And sometimes that was enough. The children noticed the change immediately. Mama's smiling, Jacob announced at breakfast. Like really smiling. I smile, Clara protested. Not like that. Sarah's eyes moved from her mother to Silas, understanding dawning. Something happened. Nothing happened. You're a terrible liar, Mama. Sarah Jane Whitmore. She's right, Benjamin said. He was watching Silas with that measuring look Clara knew so well. Something's different. Silas set down his coffee cup. Your mother and I had a conversation last night about the future. What kind of future? The kind where we stay, Clara said quietly. All of us. Together. The cabin went silent. Emma looked up from her oatmeal. Stay forever. If that's what everyone wants. I want to stay. Jacob bounced in his seat. I like it here. Mr. Silas is going to teach me to trap beaver. What about you? Clara looked at Sarah. What do you want? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I want to go to school. There's a school in town, isn't there? There is, Silas said. And come spring if you want, I'll take you there myself." Sarah's face lit up. Really? A girl ought to have an education. Clara's throat tightened. He was already thinking about their futures, already planning, providing, being a father in all the ways that mattered. Benjamin. She turned to her oldest. "You've been quiet." Benjamin set down his spoon. His young face was serious, thoughtful. "When Papa died," he said slowly, "I told myself I'd never let another man take his place. I thought if I did, it would mean forgetting him, betraying him." Benjamin. "Let me finish." He took a breath. "But Mr. Silas, he ain't trying to replace Papa. He's just being here, being steady, making sure we're safe." He looked at the man across the table. "I've been hard on you. I'm sorry for that." "No need to apologize." "There is." Benjamin stood crossing to Silas. He held out his hand. "My papa would have liked you. I think he'd be glad we found you." Silas looked at the offered hand. Then he took it and shook it firmly. "I'll do my best to deserve that," he said. Benjamin nodded and sat back down. Clara wiped her eyes with her napkin. "Mama's crying again," Lily observed. "Happy tears, baby, happy tears." "That's silly." "Maybe, but sometimes silly is the best kind of truth." The meal continued. The cabin filled with chatter and laughter and the sounds of a family coming together. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be arguments and setbacks and days when the grief felt unbearable. But there would also be these moments of connection, of belonging, of hope. Clara caught Silas's eye across the table. He smiled a real smile, one that softened all the hard edges of his face. She smiled back. Outside, the winter sun rose higher, turning the snow to gold. Inside, a fire burned steady and warm. And somewhere deep in Clara's heart, a door that had been closed for a very long time finally began to open. The weeks that followed were the closest thing to peace Clara had known in years. She woke each morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of children's laughter. She fell asleep each night with Silas's hand brushing against hers, a silent promise in the dark. The cabin, that had once felt too small, now felt exactly right, every corner filled with life and noise and love. But peace, she was learning, had a way of making people careless. It was Benjamin who noticed first. "Riders coming," he said one afternoon, looking up from the harness he was mending. "3 of them." Clara's stomach dropped. She reached for the rifle by the door. "Easy." Silas put a hand on her arm. "I know those horses. It's the preacher from town, Reverend Hollis." The preacher. And 2 others, probably church elders. His jaw tightened. "Looks like we're about to have visitors." Clara set down the rifle, but her hands were still shaking. "What do they want?" "Nothing good, I expect." The riders reached the cabin 10 minutes later. Reverend Hollis was a thin man with sharp eyes and a mouth that looked like it had never smiled. The 2 men with him were older, dressed in black, their faces set in identical expressions of disapproval. "Mr. Calhoun." The Reverend dismounted and removed his hat. "We need to speak with you." "Then speak." "Perhaps inside the matter is delicate." Silas glanced at Clara. She nodded slightly. "Children go to the barn," she said. "Benjamin, take Lily." "But Mama." "Now." Benjamin gathered his siblings and herded them toward the barn, looking back over his shoulder with worried eyes. "Come in," Silas said flatly. "But make it quick." The 3 men filed into the cabin. They stood near the door, refusing the chairs Clara offered, their eyes taking in every detail of the small space. "Mrs. Whitmore," Reverend Hollis turned to her. "We've heard some troubling reports." "What kind of reports?" "That you've been living here, with Mr. Calhoun, unmarried." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Calhoun has been kind enough to offer us shelter. My children and I had nowhere else to go. Be that as it may, the arrangement is improper. A widow living alone with a man who is not her husband. The Reverend shook his head. Surely you understand how this appears. It appears like survival, Silas said coldly. She showed up in a blizzard with 5 starving children. Was I supposed to turn them away? You could have brought them to town. The church has resources. The church wasn't standing in the snow that night. I was. One of the elders stepped forward. Mr. Calhoun, we're not questioning your intentions, but the situation as it stands is causing talk. The good people of this community are concerned about the moral example being set. The good people of this community can mind their own business. Silas. Clara touched his arm. Let me. She turned to face the Reverend, drawing herself up straight. Reverend Hollis, I understand your concerns. I do. But let me be clear about something. I came here because I had no choice. My husband is dead. My home was taken. I had 5 children to feed and no money to feed them. Mr. Calhoun offered us shelter when no one else would. He has been nothing but honorable. Honorable? The Reverend's eyebrows rose. A man and woman unmarried sharing a roof. Where do the children sleep, Mrs. Whitmore? In the bed, all of us together. And Mr. Calhoun? By the fire. Every night. Clara's face burned. Every night. Even so. Even so what? Her voice hardened. You want to talk about propriety? About appearances? My children were starving. They were freezing. They would have died if this man hadn't taken us in. And you want to judge us for surviving. We're not judging. Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're doing. She stepped closer to the Reverend, her fear burning away into anger. Where were you when we needed help? Where was your church? Where were your resources? We knocked on plenty of doors on our way west. Every one of them closed in our faces. But this man you're here to lecture, he opened his door. He fed us. He kept us warm. He asked for nothing in return. The cabin fell silent. Reverend Hollis cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, no one is disputing Mr. Calhoun's generosity. But the fact remains that this arrangement cannot continue. Not without some legitimization. Legitimization. Marriage. The word fell like a stone. If you and Mr. Calhoun were to wed, the situation would be resolved. No more talk. No more scandal. Clara's breath caught. She looked at Silas. His face was unreadable. That's not why I brought her here, he said quietly. Nevertheless, it would solve the problem. Marriage ain't a solution to a problem. It's a commitment, a lifetime one. Then perhaps you should have considered that before. Before what? Silas's voice turned dangerous. Before I saved 5 lives, before I gave a widow and her children a roof over their heads. You want me to apologize for that? No one is asking for an apology. Then what are you asking for? The Reverend spread his hands. Simply that you make an honest woman of Mrs. Whitmore. Surely that's not too much to ask, given the circumstances. Silas looked at Clara. She looked back at him. Something passed between them, a question, an answer, 1,000 things that couldn't be said with strangers in the room. Get out, Silas said. I beg your pardon. You heard me. Get out of my cabin. Mr. Calhoun. This ain't your business. Whatever happens between me and Clara, it happens because we choose it, not because some busybody preacher tells us to. He crossed to the door and yanked it open. Now leave. Before I say something, we'll all regret. The Reverend's face reddened. This isn't over. It is for today. The 3 men filed out, their backs stiff with offense. Silas stood in the doorway until they mounted their horses and started down the trail. Then he closed the door and leaned against it. Well, he said, that went well. Clara laughed, a sound that was half sob. What are we going to do? About what? About what they said, about the talk, about... She waved her hand helplessly. All of it. Silas crossed to her and took her hands. Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honest. All right. If there was no talk, no scandal, no preacher breathing down our necks, would you still want to stay? Yes. Would you still want this? He gestured between them. Us? Yes. Then that's all that matters. He squeezed her hands. I don't give a damn what those men think. I don't give a damn what anyone in that town thinks. The only opinions I care about are in this cabin. Yours and those children's. That's it. But if they make trouble, let them try. I've faced worse than gossip. Silas, I don't want you to have to fight the whole world for us. I ain't fighting the whole world. His eyes were steady on hers. Just the parts that try to hurt my family. There it was again. That word. Family. Say that again, she whispered. What you just said. The last part. He paused, understanding dawning. My family. I like that. So do I. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. So do I. The children came back from the barn full of questions. What did those men want? Benjamin demanded. Did they threaten you? No threats. Just opinions. What kind of opinions? Clara glanced at Silas. He nodded slightly. They think it's improper. A woman and her children living with a man who isn't her husband. Benjamin's face darkened. That's stupid. Maybe. But it's how some folks think. So what happens now? They gonna make us leave? Nobody's making anyone leave. Silas's voice was firm. This is my land, my cabin. I decide who stays and who goes. But they could make trouble in town, Sarah said quietly. They could tell people things, make it hard for us. Let them talk. Words can't hurt us. Sometimes they can. Sarah's eyes were old beyond her years. Sometimes words hurt worse than anything. Silas knelt down to her level. You're right. Words can hurt. But you know what hurts more? Letting fear decide how you live. Those men want us to be scared. Want us to change who we are to make them comfortable. I ain't doing that. Are you? Sarah considered this. No. Then we're agreed. He stood up. Now who wants to help me fix that fence before supper? Jacob's hand shot up. Me. I want to help. All right. Benjamin. The older boy hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'll help. They filed out of the cabin, leaving Clara alone with the girls. Emma looked up from her rag doll. Mama, are we in trouble? No, baby. We're not in trouble. Then why did those men look so angry? Because they don't understand. Sometimes people get angry about things they don't understand. That's silly. Clara smiled despite herself. Yes. Yes, it is. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Silas sat by the fire as they always did. I've been thinking, Clara said, about what the Reverend said, about marriage. Silas stiffened. Clara, let me finish. She took a breath. When he said it, my first thought was anger. How dare he try to force us into something? How dare he use our situation as leverage? That's what I thought too. But then I started thinking about it differently. Not as something we're being forced into, but as something we might actually want. He was very still. What are you saying? I'm saying. She turned to face him. I'm saying that I love you, Silas Calhoun. I didn't expect to. I didn't want to. But I do. And if we're going to spend our lives together anyway, why not make it official? Not because some preacher told us to, but because we choose it. Clara, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. That's the point. She reached out and touched his face. I want to. Do you? He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with something she'd never seen before. I've wanted to marry you since the night you sat beside me and asked about Maggie. I've wanted it so bad it scared me. I thought, I thought I didn't deserve it. Another chance. After everything. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Clara, marry me, Silas. Not for them. For us. He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, the first real full smile she'd ever seen from him. Ain't the man supposed to ask, I got tired of waiting. He laughed, a sound of pure joy that filled the cabin. All right then. Yes, I'll marry you, Clara Whitmore. I'll marry you and your 5 children and your stubbornness and your strength and everything else that comes with you. Even my terrible cooking. Especially your terrible cooking. She laughed, 2 tears streaming down her face. He pulled her close and held her like she was something precious, something sacred. When? He asked against her hair. Spring, when the road's clear. That's 2 months away. We've waited this long. 2 more months won't kill us. He pulled back to look at her. You sure about this? Once we do it, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. She pressed her hand over his heart. I want to go forward. With you. He kissed her, then soft and slow, a promise sealed without words. Outside the wind blew cold, but inside the cabin something new was blooming. Something that felt like forever. The next morning, Clara gathered the children to tell them. We need to talk, she said. Benjamin's face immediately went wary. About what? About the future, about changes. What kind of changes? Sarah asked. Clara looked at Silas. He nodded encouragingly. Mr. Calhoun and I are going to be married. Silence. Then Jacob let out a whoop. I knew it, I knew it. You did not, Emma said. Did too. I saw them kissing by the fire last week. Clara's face flamed. Jacob, this is good, right? Sarah interrupted. This means we get to stay forever. Yes, this means we stay forever. Sarah's face broke into a smile. Then I'm glad. Me too. Jacob bounced up and down. Does this mean I can call him Pa now? That's up to you. And to Silas. All eyes turned to Silas. He cleared his throat. You can call me whatever you want. I'll answer to anything. Even, hey you? Jacob giggled. Even that. Benjamin hadn't spoken. Clara turned to him, her heart tight with worry. Benjamin, what do you think? Her oldest son was staring at the floor, his jaw working. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Papa would have wanted you to be happy, he said hoarsely. He told me once, after he got hurt that first time. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should take care of you. Make sure you didn't stay sad forever. Clara's throat closed. I tried, Benjamin continued. I tried so hard to take care of everyone, but I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough. Benjamin, let me say this. He wiped his face roughly. I couldn't do it alone. But Silas, he can. He did. The boy looked at the man who would become his stepfather. You did what I couldn't. You kept my mama safe. You kept all of us safe. He swallowed hard. I'm grateful. Silas crossed to Benjamin and put a hand on his shoulder. Your papa raised a good man, he said quietly. You've been carrying a weight no boy should have to carry. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. That's what family means. Benjamin nodded, tears streaming down his face. Can I? He hesitated. Can I call you Pa too? Silas's voice was rough. I'd be honored. Benjamin stepped forward and hugged him, a fierce, desperate hug that held all the grief and fear and hope of the past year. Silas hugged him back, his own eyes wet. Clara watched them, her heart breaking and healing all at once. This was what she'd been searching for. Not just shelter, not just safety, but this, a family rebuilt from broken pieces, stronger for having been broken. Mama's crying again, Lily announced. Happy tears? Jacob explained. She does that a lot now. It's weird. Grown-ups are weird. Okay, that's enough. Clara wiped her eyes and laughed. Who wants breakfast? The morning continued. Food was made, chores were assigned, life went on. But everything felt different now. Everything felt like a beginning. Word of the engagement reached town faster than Clara expected. 3 days later, a woman appeared at the cabin, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, riding a mule that looked as stubborn as she did. Mrs. Patterson, Silas said, surprised. What brings you up here? Heard you're getting married? News travels fast. News in this territory travels faster than good sense. She dismounted and brushed off her skirts. I came to see this woman who's finally tamed the mountain hermit. Clara stepped onto the porch, wiping flour from her hands. I'm Clara Whitmore. Mrs. Patterson looked her up and down. You're prettier than I expected. Thank you. Wasn't a compliment. Pretty women tend to be trouble. She climbed the porch steps. Reverend Hollis is telling everyone you're a scarlet woman. Says you've been living in sin. That's not true. Didn't figure it was. Hollis wouldn't know sin if it bit him on the backside. Mrs. Patterson's stern face cracked into something like a smile. I came to tell you not to worry about him. Half the women in town think he's a pompous fool. The other half are married to pompous fools, so they don't count. Clara laughed despite herself. I appreciate that. I also came to offer my help. With the wedding, I mean. You'll need a witness. Someone respectable. She drew herself up. I'm the most respectable woman in 3 counties. Ask anyone. I don't doubt it. Good. Then it's settled. She looked past Clara into the cabin. Those your children. All 5 of them. Good Lord. You have been busy. They're from my first marriage. My husband passed. Ah. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. I'm sorry for that. Lost my own Henry 12 years ago. Never remarried. Never found anyone who could put up with me. Maybe you weren't looking hard enough. Maybe I was looking too hard. The older woman smiled. You've got spine, Clara Whitmore. I like that. This territory needs more women with spine. She stayed for coffee and conversation. By the time she left, Clara felt like she'd made her first real friend in Wyoming. She's something else, Silas said, watching Mrs. Patterson's mule disappear down the trail. She's wonderful. She once hit a man with a frying pan for insulting her biscuits. That makes me like her even more. Silas laughed and put his arm around her. 2 months, he said. Think we can make it? I think we can make it through anything. He kissed her temple. So do I. The weeks passed slowly, each day, bringing them closer to spring and to a future none of them had dared to imagine. Clara worked on a wedding dress, piecing it together from scraps of fabric Mrs. Patterson brought up the mountain. Sarah helped with the sewing, her small fingers surprisingly deft. Benjamin and Silas spent hours together checking traps and mending fences, the awkwardness between them finally giving way to something like friendship. Jacob caught his first fish through the ice and wouldn't stop talking about it for days. Emma made a crown of dried flowers for Clara to wear. Lily learned to say "Pa" and used it constantly, delighted by the way Silas's face softened every time she did. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments and frustrations, and days when the cabin felt too small for 7 people. But there was also laughter and love, and the slow, steady building of something real. One night a week before the wedding, Clara found Silas standing outside the cabin looking up at the stars. "Can't sleep," she asked. "Too much thinking." "What about—" He was quiet for a moment. "Maggie." Clara's heart clenched. "You miss her." "Always will. But it ain't sad missing anymore. It's grateful missing. Does that make sense?" "I think so. I used to feel guilty. Loving you, like I was betraying her somehow." He turned to face Clara. "But I realized something. Maggie would have wanted this. She would have wanted me to live, really live. Not just survive up here alone, getting older and angrier and more broken. She sounds like she was a good woman. The best. Until you." Clara's eyes stung. Silas, I mean it. She was my first love. You're my last. And I ain't ashamed of neither. She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. His arms came around her. I think Thomas would have liked you, she said. He was always telling me I worried too much, that I needed someone steady to lean on. Am I steady? The steadiest man I know. They stood there in the cold, wrapped around each other, two people who had lost everything and somehow found their way back to life. 1 week, Clara murmured. 1 week. You nervous? Terrified. She laughed. Me too. Good. At least we're terrified together. She tilted her head up to look at him. I love you, Silas Calhoun. I love you too, Clara Whitmore. He paused. Soon to be Clara Calhoun. Clara Calhoun. I like the sound of that. Better get used to it. You're going to be hearing it for a long time. She kissed him, then long and slow, a promise of all the years to come. Above them, the stars burned bright against the black sky, and somewhere in the darkness, a future they'd never expected was waiting to be born. The morning of the wedding arrived, wrapped in the kind of quiet that only the mountains could hold. Clara woke before dawn, her heart already racing. She lay still for a moment, listening to her children's breathing, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this day. A year ago, she had been burying her husband. 6 months ago, she had been running for her life. 3 months ago, she had knocked on a stranger's door with nothing but 5 hungry children and a desperate prayer. Now she was about to become that stranger's wife. Mama. Emma's voice was sleepy. Is it today? It's today. Are you scared? Clara considered the question. A little. Are you? No. Emma snuggled closer. Silas makes good pancakes. I want him to stay forever. Clara laughed softly. Well, that settles it then. The cabin came alive slowly. Sarah helped Clara into the wedding dress they'd sewn together, simple white cotton with lace at the collar. Nothing fancy, but clean and beautiful. Benjamin brushed his hair without being asked. Jacob complained about his too tight shoes until Silas loosened the laces. Lily toddled around, getting in everyone's way, delighted by the excitement she didn't understand. Mrs. Patterson arrived mid-morning, her mule laden with food and flowers. You look like a bride, she said, surveying Clara with satisfaction. A real one. Not like those painted dolls in the city. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. The older woman pressed a small package into Clara's hands. Something borrowed. My mother's brooch. She wore it on her wedding day. So did I. Clara opened the package. Inside was a delicate silver brooch shaped like a mountain flower. I can't accept this. You can and you will. It brings luck. Mrs. Patterson's eyes softened. Lord knows you've earned some luck. Clara pinned the brooch to her collar, blinking back tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The hard part hasn't started. The hard part? Marriage. Mrs. Patterson snorted. The wedding's easy. It's everything after that tests you. I think we've already been tested. Then you're ahead of most. The older woman squeezed her hand. You'll be fine, Clara. You've got spine. And that man of yours, well, he's got spine too. 2 spines together, that's a good foundation. The preacher they'd chosen wasn't Reverend Hollis. Silas had found a traveling minister named Father Quinn, a weathered Irishman with kind eyes and a voice like warm honey. He arrived just before noon, shaking snow from his coat and accepting coffee with gratitude. Beautiful day for a wedding, he said. God smiles on new beginnings. Even ones the town disapproves of, Clara asked, especially those. The best beginnings are the ones people doubt. He smiled. Proves they're worth fighting for. The ceremony was held outside, despite the cold. Clara had wanted it that way, surrounded by the mountains that had sheltered them, the trees that had witnessed their journey. The children stood in a row, scrubbed and solemn. Mrs. Patterson served as witness. Father Quinn opened his worn Bible. "Dearly beloved," he began. Clara barely heard the words. She was looking at Silas, this man who had opened his door to strangers who had fought for them, bled for them, loved them when he had every reason not to. His eyes were fixed on hers, and in them she saw everything he couldn't say. Fear and hope and a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Do you, Silas Calhoun, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara Jane Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's voice was steady. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Father Quinn smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Silas stepped forward. His hands cupped her face, rough and gentle at the same time. "Hello, Mrs. Calhoun," he murmured. "Hello, Mr. Calhoun." He kissed her, and the children erupted into cheers. "Ew," Jacob said. "They're being gross." "Shut up." Benjamin elbowed him. "It's romantic." "Since when do you know about romantic?" "Since I got smarter than you." "Boys," Clara pulled back from Silas, laughing. "Can you not fight for 5 minutes?" "Probably not," Jacob admitted. "At least he's honest," Silas said. The celebration that followed was simple but warm. Mrs. Patterson had brought a cake lopsided but delicious. Father Quinn told stories of weddings he'd performed across the territory, each one more improbable than the last. The children played in the snow until their faces were red, and their laughter echoed off the mountains. As the sun began to set, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the clearing, looking out at the valley below. "Penny for your thoughts." She turned. Silas had come up behind her, quiet as always. "Just thinking about how different everything is. A year ago, I couldn't imagine being happy again. Now I can't imagine being anything else." He stood beside her, their shoulders touching. "I've been thinking too," he said. "About the future. About what comes next." "What do you mean?" "This cabin. It's too small for 7 people. Come spring, I want to build an addition. More rooms. A real kitchen. Maybe a porch where we can sit and watch the sunset." Clara's throat tightened. "You've been planning this." "Been planning it since the night you told me you loved me. Figured if I was going to keep you, I'd better make it worth staying." "Silas Calhoun." She turned to face him. "I would stay in a tent if it meant staying with you." "I know. That's why you deserve better than a tent." She kissed him long and slow, tasting cake and coffee, and the promise of years to come. "Get a room," Jacob shouted from across the clearing. "We have a room," Silas called back. "You're living in it." "That's weird." "Everything about this family is weird," Benjamin said. "Just accept it." Clara laughed against Silas's chest. "He's right, you know. We are weird." "Best kind of weird." Silas pulled back to look at her. "Ready to go inside. It's getting cold." "In a minute." She turned back to the valley. "I want to remember this. The way it feels right now, before everything changes." "Nothing's changing." "Everything's changing, but that's okay." She reached for his hand. "Because we're changing together." They stood there until the stars came out, 2 people who had found each other against all odds. Then they went inside to warmth and family and home. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Clara had been a wife before, but not like this. Not with a man who rose before dawn to check traps and returned at dusk with stories of what he'd seen. Not with a man who carved toys for children who weren't his blood, but treated them like they were. Not with a man who reached for her in the dark with a hunger that still surprised her. Silas had been alone so long that sharing space came hard. He forgot to tell her when he was leaving. He grew quiet when the cabin felt too crowded. He retreated to the porch when the noise overwhelmed him. But they learned. Clara learned that his silence wasn't rejection, it was his way of processing. Silas learned that her need to know where he was wasn't nagging, it was love wearing the face of worry. They argued about small things. Dishes left unwashed children underfoot, the proper way to cook venison, and made up in the quiet hours after everyone else was asleep. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked one night 3 weeks after the wedding. Silas looked up from the harness he was mending. "Regret what?" "All of this. Us. The chaos." "Is there a reason I should—" "Sometimes I wonder if you miss the quiet, the way things were before we came." He set down the harness and crossed to where she sat. "Clara, before you came, I was dying. Slowly maybe, but dying all the same. I'd wake up every morning with no reason to get out of bed except habit. I'd go to sleep every night hoping I wouldn't wake up." "Silas, let me finish." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You didn't bring chaos into my life. You brought life into my life. Real life. Messy and loud and complicated, but alive. I haven't felt this way since Maggie died. I'd forgotten what it was like to care about tomorrow. And now? Now I can't wait for tomorrow. Every single one." He squeezed her hands. "So no. I don't regret anything. Not one moment." She leaned forward and kissed him. "I love you," she whispered. "I know. It's probably the only thing I'm sure of anymore." "Only thing—" "Well—" His eyes crinkled with a rare smile. "That, and the fact that Jacob's gonna burn down the barn if we don't teach him proper fire safety." Clara laughed. "He almost set the haystack on fire yesterday." "I know. I was the one who put it out. And you still don't regret having us here?" "Not even a little." She pulled him up onto the bench beside her, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Spring arrived, slowly melting the snow in patches, coaxing green shoots from the frozen ground. With it came change. Silas started on the addition he'd promised, 2 new rooms, built onto the back of the cabin, one for the girls, one for the boys. Benjamin worked alongside him, learning to measure and cut and hammer. Jacob helped when he wasn't distracted by frogs in the creek. Even the girls pitched in, carrying lumber and fetching tools. Clara watched her family grow into this new life and felt something loosen in her chest. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long was finally fading, replaced by something calmer. Something that felt like hope. One afternoon in late April, Mrs. Patterson came up the mountain with news. "Harlan Price is dead," she announced, settling into the chair by the fire. Clara's blood went cold. "What happened?" "Shot in Cheyenne. Tried to run the same scam on a rancher's wife. Turns out her husband wasn't as forgiving as your Silas. And Decker, in prison, for fraud, kidnapping, and half a dozen other charges." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "They'd been doing this for years, apparently. Targeting widows, forging documents, taking children. You were lucky, Clara." "We weren't lucky." Clara looked out the window where Silas and Benjamin were working on the new roof. "We were blessed. Call it what you want. The point is, it's over. You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore." Over. The word sat in Clara's chest like a stone finally lifting. "Thank you for telling me." "Thought you should know." Mrs. Patterson stood to leave, then paused. "You've built something good here, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "I won't." That night, Clara told Silas about Price. He was quiet for a long moment. "Good," he said finally. "One less monster in the world." "You don't feel guilty about what you did to Decker?" "I shot a man who was planning to sell children. No, I don't feel guilty." He pulled her close. "I'd do it again without hesitation." "I know. That's what scares me sometimes." "What do you mean, the capacity for violence? In you? In me?" She shook her head. "I told you once that understanding why a man does what he has to do felt like losing part of myself. I still feel that way sometimes." "That ain't loss, Clara. That's growth." He tilted her chin up. "The world's got plenty of soft people who close their eyes to hard things. What it needs is people who see the hard things and do what's necessary anyway. That's not violence. That's love. the kind that protects instead of just feeling. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm old and stubborn. He kissed her forehead. There's a difference. She laughed and settled against him. Price being gone. It means we're really safe now, doesn't it? As safe as anyone can be. That's not very reassuring. It's honest. And honest is better than reassuring. He stroked her hair. But yeah, we're safe. The children are safe. This family's gonna be okay. Promise. I promise. She closed her eyes and let his heartbeat steady her. For the first time in over a year, she believed him completely. Summer came in a blaze of green and gold. The addition was finished in June. 2 rooms with real walls and real floors, filled with beds and blankets and the accumulated treasures of 5 children. Sarah hung curtains she'd sewn herself. Emma arranged her ragdoll collection on a shelf. The boys fought over who got the window bed until Silas built a second window just to shut them up. Clara stood in the doorway of the new wing, marveling at how far they'd come. "You're crying again," Lily observed. She was 3 now, chattering constantly, following Silas everywhere like a small blonde shadow. Happy tears. You have a lot of those. I'm a very happy person. Because of Pa? Because of all of you. Clara scooped her up and kissed her cheek. Because of this family. I like our family. Me too, sweet girl. Me too. In August, Sarah started school in town. Silas drove her down the mountain every morning and picked her up every afternoon just as he'd promised. She came home with books and stories and a hunger for learning that reminded Clara of herself at that age. I want to be a teacher, Sarah announced one evening at dinner, when I grow up. That's a fine ambition, Silas said. You don't think it's silly? I think a girl who survived what you survived can be anything she wants to be. Sarah's face glowed. In September, Benjamin turned 13. They celebrated with cake and presents and a hunting trip, just him and Silas, 3 days in the high country. He came back taller, somehow, quieter, more at peace. What happened up there? Clara asked Silas. We talked. About his father, about life, about what it means to be a man. That's all. That's everything. Silas smiled. He's gonna be okay, Clara. Better than okay. He's gonna be great. October brought the first frost and a letter from Missouri. Clara opened it with trembling hands. It was from a lawyer, Thomas's former partner, writing to inform her that a lawsuit against the First Bank of Kansas City had been settled. As a victim of their fraud, she was entitled to a portion of the settlement. How much? Silas asked. Clara stared at the number. Enough to buy more land, enough to expand the herd, enough to... She looked up, tears streaming. Enough to build something real. We already have something real. Something bigger then. Something that'll last. Silas took the letter and read it himself. What do you want to do with it? What do you want to do? I asked first. Clara thought about it. About everything they'd been through, everything they'd built. I want to use it for the children's future. Education for Sarah. Land for Benjamin when he's grown. Something set aside for each of them. And nothing for us. We have everything we need. She gestured around the cabin. This is enough, more than enough. Silas nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Just like that. Just like that. He pulled her close. The money was never going to make us happy, Clara. We were already happy. This just gives us options. Options are good. Options are very good. He kissed her. Now stop crying and help me figure out what to do with 200 head of cattle. 200? I've been thinking about expanding. Silas Calhoun. When were you planning to tell me this? When it became relevant. He grinned. It just became relevant. She hit his chest and laughed. You're impossible. You married me anyway. Best decision I ever made. Second best. What was the first? Knocking on my door in that blizzard. His eyes were soft. If you hadn't been brave enough to do that, none of this would exist. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Sometimes that's the same thing. He held her tighter. Sometimes desperate is just brave wearing different clothes. The year turned. Snow fell again, but this time it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a blanket covering the mountain in white, sealing them in together. On Christmas morning, Clara woke to find the cabin transformed. The children had decorated with whatever they could find: pine branches, dried berries, paper chains made from old newspapers. A tree stood in the corner, small but proud, covered in ornaments Silas had carved. "Merry Christmas, Mama," Sarah said. "Merry Christmas, baby." They exchanged gifts, small things, homemade things, but precious for the love they represented. Silas gave Clara a necklace he'd made from polished stones found by the creek. She gave him a new coat she'd sewn in secret, lined with fur from the pelts he'd traded. The children gave each other things wrapped in cloth and paper, their excitement filling the cabin with noise and joy. After breakfast, when the wrapping paper had been cleared and the children were playing with their gifts, Silas pulled Clara aside. "I have something else for you. You've given me enough. This is different." He pressed something into her hand. "Open it." It was a small wooden box carved with mountain flowers. Inside, on a bed of velvet, lay a ring, simple gold, unadorned, worn smooth by years of use. "This was Maggie's," Silas said quietly. "I kept it after she died. Couldn't bring myself to sell it or give it away." "Silas, I can't. Let me finish." He took the ring from the box. "For a long time I thought keeping it meant I was holding on to her. But now I realize it was just sitting in a drawer doing nothing. Meaning nothing. It meant something to you. It meant the past. But you," he took her hand, "you're my future. I want you to have this. Not as a replacement for Maggie, but as a promise. That I'll love you the way I loved her. Completely. Forever." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "What if she minds wherever she is?" "She doesn't." Silas slipped the ring onto her finger. "I know it. Maggie had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. She would have loved you, Clara. She would have loved these children, and she would have wanted me to live, not just survive. You really believe that? With everything I am." Clara looked at the ring on her finger, the ring that had been worn by another woman, loved by another wife, kept safe for all these years. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." He pulled her close. "For giving me a reason to wear my heart again." They stood there in the warmth of their cabin, surrounded by the sounds of children laughing and fire crackling, and life being lived to the fullest. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, a family continued to grow. Years later, when people asked Clara about that first winter on the mountain, she would smile and say it was the hardest and best time of her life. Hard, because she'd arrived with nothing. No money, no hope, no guarantee of tomorrow. Best because she'd left with everything: a husband who adored her children, who thrived, a home that had grown from one small cabin to a proper ranch with cattle and horses and hired hands. Benjamin grew into the man his father would have been proud of: steady, kind, strong in all the ways that mattered. He married at 22 a schoolteacher's daughter and built a house on the property where he raised his own family. Sarah became the teacher she'd dreamed of being, running the schoolhouse in town where she'd once been a student. She never married by choice, preferring her independence and her books. But she was beloved by generations of children who learned to read and write and dream under her patient guidance. Jacob took over the ranch when Silas's hands grew too stiff to work. He had a gift with animals that bordered on magic, and the Calhoun cattle became famous throughout the territory for their quality. Emma married a traveling preacher and spent her life wandering the frontier, bringing medicine and education to those who needed it most. She kept her rag doll until the day she died, a reminder of the journey that had brought her to the mountain. And Lily, little Lily, who had been carried through a blizzard by a stranger who became her father, She stayed. She stayed and cared for Clara and Silas as they aged, repaying the love they'd given her with love of her own. She was the one who held Clara's hand when Silas passed peacefully in his sleep 40 years after that first winter. She was the one who read the eulogy at his funeral, speaking of a man who had opened his door to desperate strangers and never once regretted it. Clara lived another 5 years after that. She spent them on the porch of the cabin, expanded now, but still the same bones, watching the sun set over mountains that had sheltered her family through hardship and joy. On her last night, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she closed her eyes and saw it all again. The blizzard, the knock on the door, the weathered face of a man who had every reason to turn her away, but didn't. "Was it worth it, Mama?" Sarah asked, holding her hand. "All the struggle, all the pain." Clara smiled. "Every moment," she whispered. "Every single moment." She died with the mountain air in her lungs and peace in her heart. A woman who had knocked on a stranger's door with nothing but 5 children and a prayer, and who had found against all odds exactly what she was searching for. Not just shelter, not just safety, but a place to belong, a family to love, a home. And in the end, that was all any of them had ever needed.